Welcome everybody to this week's huddle. We come at you every Tuesday to discuss how to maintain forward progress in your flooring career. So this week with us is we got the Preferred Flooring folks again. Crystal's joining us, Daniel, Jose, and Ashlyn's going to come on here and discuss a scholarship that we are doing for the SIM program with the FCICA. So, Ashlyn, take it away.
Okay, well, if you missed it last week, Daniel and Paul were in Florida with CJ and the FCICA. We have now created the Forward Progress Scholarship, which will help send an installer to be part of the FCICA Certified Installation Manager program, with the option to also be a part of the 3 Days to SIM program. All you have to do, go ahead and just email Ashlyn at GoCarrera, that's ASHLYNN, at GoCarrera.com, or you can message us on any of our social medias right now for more information on how to apply.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ashlyn. I would say that the SIM program is going to be hammer rated now. So you get hammer rating for going through the program. There's more and more installers that I think, as we've looked at it and talked to more guys, there's more than I realized that have went through the program already. And it's a tremendous training, teaching you a lot of the stuff we go over on whether it's running projects or trying to manage crews or get work done. A lot of the best practices are right there in that SIM program. Again, that's ran by the FCICA and the Forward Progress Scholarship. Again, just to echo what Ashlyn just said, email her, Ashlyn at GoCarrera.com. That's ASHLYNN. And then we can get you hooked up and entered into the scholarship. And we will be announcing, I'm not sure which 3 Days to SIM we're going to promote quite yet, but that'll come about here. Ashlyn can let you know that. So hopefully we get plenty of applicants, because I really would like to see who's interested in learning more of the business side and the maybe not so much technical training, but more mindset and how to go about running winning projects. I think that's what SIM teaches.
Oh, that was loud.
My bad.
What's that?
So that was loud. Hey, you pushed the button over here. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Gotcha. So this week, our discussion is the generational gap, bridging the generational gap. So as many people on this call know, and a lot of the flooring companies can attest, is the average age of the installer is somewhere between that 53 to 58, depending on the region. There's been a lot of discussion about, and Jose can talk about it too, at our FCICA convention. That was like probably the most talked about topic, was the new generation and the old generation, and how to get those two to come together and transfer of knowledge from the older guys to older men and women that are in the trade into the younger men and women that are joining the trade now. There was a lot of quick to say, well, the younger generation's lazy and doesn't want to work. I think we heard that a little bit. I don't know that, we pushed back. I know Jose pushed back on that thought process, and that my opinion is the older guys need to really stand up and mentor the younger generation. Like, just take the burden on yourself that it is our duty as experienced installers to pass that knowledge on. So when you're dealing with a helper or something, look at you less as just an employer arrangement, and maybe look at it as a mentor-mentee arrangement as well. But anyway, I know that came up a lot. What's your thoughts of how that was discussed during the convention?
Well, 'cause I think the thought process, no matter where you're at, is always the same. You know, the younger generation is lazy, the older generation is aging out. It's too late for me to teach somebody. You know, and it's all perspective. If you're gonna believe that they're lazy, then you're gonna believe you're not gonna let it go. But if you're saying that but not offering an opportunity and not devoting some time uh, for someone who falls under that category, then you're not really getting your hands dirty, so to speak. You have to give someone an opportunity to fail before you already label them lazy or a failure at what you're trying to teach.
Well, I think you pointed out something that's important that I want to bring up, and that is they operate differently. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean lazy. They're trying to find more efficient ways to do things, and that's not so far from what, like some of the tool manufacturers are doing. They're trying to make tools that make it easier on your body. We got to sit through several demonstrations of
yes.
awesome tools that keep you off your knees. Like that's
You know,
all beneficial, right? It's not, you brought that point up, but I wanted to remind you about that you said, they're different. They just they approach things differently. That doesn't mean they're lazy though.
yeah, they grew up in a different time, right? They have a lot of information at their fingertips. And when you are teaching someone who's part of the younger generation, they don't just take what you said and go back and just ponder on that, right? They take what you said, go back and find many other variations of your thought process. And then
They YouTube it.
they come
Yeah.
back, they come back to the table with a hybrid version of what they feel the direction of that should go. And just because we went through from point A to point B, walking through the snow with one sock and no shoes, doesn't mean that they're going to want to do that same process, right? They're going to say, "Hey, let's get in a vehicle, let's go and try to expedite this. Let's try to make it easier on everybody involved." They're going to help refine the training process.
Well, there's been, people that have come through here and then that's what they do. They research stuff and go on YouTube and then they'll come back and be like, hey, check this out. And sometimes it's like, I never knew about that. Let's look into this. And you can't be closed-minded. You have to take that information and expand on it.
Yeah, do you think, another thing that came up was that, not just that the younger generation was necessarily lazy, but also that they seem to not want to, it's not that they're lazy, it's just they're not as money driven. Do you remember that when they
Yes,
kept
yeah.
saying that they're not as money driven, so they're
That's facts.
would you see that as true? And Crystal, you're in the room here. Thanks for joining us today. Do you guys see that as true? Do you see that the younger generation is not as money motivated and more experience, as far as like they want their work life to be rewarding in some way, but not totally consume their life?
So I don't mean to interrupt your thought process. So my opinion on that, and that's just my opinion, is that a lot of the younger generation grew up where their parents have devoted a lot of time to their craft and to their business or to work, where there was not a lot of family time per se, right? So in order to break that cycle, the thought process has to change. And when the thought process changed, the systems change. And that's what they're doing, is they're approaching it a little bit different. Yeah, they want to go out and be successful and have a good career, a good paying job. But if they're going to find balance of work and home life, work and family, they're going to find balance more than the older generation. The older generation is, I got to provide. So work is important so they can live a better life. Well, you know what? You did a good job. They did live a better life, but now they understand that they missed a lot of family time and they're trying to close that gap.
So I think a lot of it, like looking at my nephews and stuff that are, they're you know, in their younger 20s and seeing how, and my nieces too, like they jump from job to job, and you want to say that they're not money motivated, but if you look at the younger people, they'll jump from one job to another for a quarter an hour, and it's like we were offering you, not us, but you know, one company was offering them so much, but then they jump over here just because that quarter an hour. But they're, a lot of that's just one aspect of it, but a lot of the younger people that I talk to, and I think they're looking more for the benefits package, you know, what they want, that healthcare, they want to know that they're going to be covered in retirement. They're looking out, you know, because they're looking at their parents right now or their grandparents, and they're like, they're retiring with nothing. Like, I don't want to be that person that has to work in order to make it through retirement.
Well, and a cool metric outside flooring is that the US has the youngest investor population in its history, meaning our population is investing earlier, younger than ever, which would, you know, kind of go to your point, Daniel, that, you know, they care about their future. I don't know. So where does the rubber meet the road? How do we bridge the generational gap? What's our best advice to give to the audience on how to approach younger? Because I think part of this is you can't just throw your hands up, say they don't want to learn or they're lazy or whatever. Like it's in our approach. The older folks, you know, I think it's on our shoulders to approach the younger generation in a way that they understand. So that's part of it. What's your guys' thoughts on that?
We
Like,
gotta
how do we
start
actually bridge it?
we got to start listening to
Yeah.
what the younger generation is saying. The the women in flooring at convention, at CFI convention, actually opened my eyes up to that, and probably them too. It's when, you know, Jeff was just sitting off to the side, and at the end, you know, he came in and said that everything that we were saying is all based on assumption. I assume this, so that's where this thought process is, and they assume this, so it's open communication between everyone, and knowing that, one, you got to take the younger generation's perspective into account, and two, you got to realize that you're not always right. We say all the time that, you know, just because I've been doing this for 40 years. Well, you've been doing it wrong for 40 years. I don't necessarily mean that, you know, everyone's thought process has been wrong, but you have to evolve your thought process in order to know that, you know, things are changing. Let's start changing with the times. Just because you've done this for 30 years doesn't mean it's right now. It's about time to start changing. And we got, you know, John Steyer right here. He says that the younger generation is they work to live, while, you know, their moms and dads live to work. And I see that a lot because
Oh,
you
I like
talk
that.
to, you know, in some of these groups, they're like, oh, you only work 45 hours. I remember my first part-time job, you know,
Yeah.
we can go back to that. And it's
I'll still
like,
say that.
that is how it was. Like, even when I came into the trade, it was like, if you weren't working 60 hours a week, there was something wrong with you. And now it's like, people want to put in their 40 hours, and they want to be able to walk away and be like, all right, I put in my 40 hours, let me go and do what I want to do. And people right now, you know, they got hobbies. Our guy Zach blows glass. He doesn't want to do this 60 hours a week and then go blow glass. It's like, I want to put in my time so that way I can go do what I enjoy doing.
Right, enjoy his
It's
hobby.
almost like we went back to when,
Yes.
you know, back to when there was some balance. I mean, back in the 50s or so, you know, you didn't work 70, 80 hours back then. And you didn't have two family households either, two family income households either back
Right.
then. Not so much, right? For the most part, the man went out and earned a living and had some balance. Nowadays, there's a two income families, which is awesome, but and almost required anymore, to be honest with you. But the point is, now that you have that, it's almost like you realize that all we're doing is working, coming home and eating dinner, going to bed, and repeating the process tomorrow. And so families maybe are starting, younger generation realizing like, I love that saying. I'd never heard that, but that is as accurate as I've heard it spoke in so little words. I do
That's
live
called
to
a
work in a
that's called
lot
a
of ways. I
styrism.
live to work.
That's called
And
a styrism right there.
yeah, so I my experience with the younger generation in installing in particular has been a little mixed. I don't see them as lazy at all. What I've experienced is it's like they have to earn their way to learn, meaning that the older generation doesn't want to teach them until they've proven themselves long enough that they're going to actually absorb the information and put it to good use. It's almost like there's a test. And I've watched it with our own crews where, one of our older crew members, won't teach a new guy anything until he's kind of proven himself that he's going to be there for a bit, that he's actually wants to learn and apply that knowledge. So it's like, I think the older generation in some ways just don't want to waste their time either. And so on that side,
And that's
how
kind of
do
what I
you
was
deal with
getting
that?
at earlier, right? When I'm saying that, talking about my nephews and stuff, because I've talked to him, I've talked to, my niece about it. And it's like, you look at their work history and through the court, I mean, how old is our nephew's 21, Lencho, right?
Yeah, 21 and
And-
24.
And then, my niece is around the same age. And it's like, you look at it and through the work history from when they turned 18 to 21, they can give you 3-4 pages of employers that they worked for. And it's like, as an employer, you look at that and you're like, if I hire this person, what are the chances that they're going to stick around long enough for me to get my return on investment? So I kind of see it from that perspective too, right?
Well, that's where the younger generation has to give a little bit, we're defending them, but at the same time, from an employer standpoint, and just like I said, the old dude standpoint or older installer standpoint, if you're a job hopper, like how do we get back to some long-term consistency? Because I do know that the stats show that younger people have more jobs. I've had 4 jobs my entire life. I'm 46 years old.
Right.
I know people who are 22 and have had 20 jobs or 10 jobs or whatever.
They've had 4
mean,
jobs in the
so-
last month.
I'll let you
Yeah.
know something. When I got into the flooring industry and I was hired, part of my conversations were, oh man, I've worked here, and I was 18 years old. And the gentleman I worked for, Ray, was like, this is years later. He's like, dude, when you started working with me and you started telling me all these places you worked, and we just like, because I started 2-week temporary and they decided to ask me to stick around. It's like, I was so nervous that you were just going to leave. I was like, it wasn't about me leaving. I left these places because, and now we're talking about it, it makes sense. I left them because it didn't fit my life. It didn't fit what I was trying to do at the time or what was important to me at the time, right? Because I worked for money back then, but when I was, before I was 18, but at the same time, is I still wanted to play baseball. I still had school. I still had other things. And some employers were not willing to bend, so to speak, to accommodate some of that. But I don't think the long list of ex-employer or ex-employment places will scare me away. I think that maybe they just have a little more experience with people. So I kind of look at it like, glass half full with that one.
Right. And it's all on perspective, right? John says that when he graduated high school, you were lucky to get a factory job at 40 hours a week. And now factories are wanting you to work 60+ hours with weekends, mandatory.
Mandatory. My
And
nephew's doing that right now.
Yeah.
And he's one of the younger ones. He's what, 23,
24.
24?
Go back to, there was another one right here, George
Jorge.
Jorge. Yeah, he said, go up a little bit. About people training that they're afraid that they're going to
Oh, right
leave
here.
and go on their own.
Afraid of, yeah. And really, that's really what you want, right? Because if someone is comfortable enough to go on their own, that means that you did your job well training them.
Mhm.
Sometimes people just think that it's going to be easy money, and then they go out there, and that's a whole nother issue, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways that happens. I mean, I think you should be proud if you get somebody and you train them well enough to go out and start their own gig. I think that should be a source of pride.
Yes.
And not looked at as bad. But there's this epidemic of guys or girls, more than the guys, to be honest with you, that work for 6 months under somebody and then think they are a flooring installer. You know, there's that's a problem. And obviously, we don't do this podcast to just promote Go Carrera, but that is one of the things Go Carrera prevents is if you've only got 6 months experience and maybe a training or two, you're just not going to have that higher hammer rating and not qualify for that much work because reality is different than that. There's a few unicorns out there that can, you know, pick this thing up in a year or something, but there's so much to being a flooring installer, so many to really be effective that, you know, 6 months or a year is a tall order. But at the end of the day, I think that if we're able to, from what Jorge said, understand that giving, because I've heard this argument, you know, they're going to take my job or it's going to be more competition or that. Well, if you train them correctly and you teach them the business side too on how to give, you know, price yourself correctly in the market, you're creating good competition. You're not creating bad competition. You're not creating, you know, hacks.
And you could
Don't
be creating a partnership anyway. It's not even necessarily competition. You could be creating a partnership. If that person is trustworthy and the workmanship is great, you're creating someone else who can essentially help you with your business as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a silver bullet to this question or this problem really, but the discussion, and I don't know, is there a you know, convention and the shows is when this gets talked about a lot in bigger group settings, but FCEF, CFI, NTC, all the different organizations, you know, I think they struggle with this same problem. I mean, they talk about it. So it would be interesting to really understand, is there steps that can be taken, like prescribed steps, like to solving the problem, or is it just like we have to take these ideals that we're talking about and then do the best we can? And that's where it's been, that's where it's stood. But it'd be interesting if we could say, you know, new guy just out of the gate realize they want to have a life. That's first off. They're not you. They didn't live your life, they lived a different life. Realize they want to have one. So then you train around that and be okay with somebody working 40 hours. And maybe one of the things is dropping that negative viewpoint on 40 hours is somehow not a full week. That's a full week's work, you know?
Still a lot, still drive time, everything else involved in there too, right? I mean, 40-hour work week, local, within a half-hour drive, you're still devoting 10 to 12 hours to your work.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the younger generation right now is looking for a comfortable workplace, somewhere where their feelings are considered just as much as, you know, them wanting to enjoy life. Like if someone comes and they're in a hostile work environment, they're not going to want to stay there. The younger generation is a lot more sensitive, I guess. Is that the right word?
They're just not willing to put up with what we did.
They can't, they have the benefit of picking and choosing their jobs because our parents worked so hard. So if they go to a job and they're being yelled at or belittled, or there's just, you know, certain vibes, if you will, that they don't agree with, then
They're just essentially like, I don't have to put up with this. I can go work over here like
Right.
tomorrow.
and that's what I've realized, like leading some of the newer guys on our crew. Like I really have to approach every individual a little bit different. You lead
Mhm.
everyone a little bit differently. You know, some you could pick on a little bit more, but some you really have to watch your words, and because you don't want to offend people, because everyone's personality is different. You might be joking, but they might not know that you're joking. So just
Right.
taking their feelings into consideration and kind of leading based on their personality, getting to know people.
And that's kind of what, you know, we touched on earlier. It's the, I've always done this, or this is how I was brought in the trade. So this is how you're going to be brought in the trade. And that's what we're trying to break right now. Right. And, you know, Eduardo said, you know, he said the last guy that I worked for, I walked. Like, I'm not gonna put up with this, you know, and that's the gravity of the situation right now, is they do not have to put up with it. And what is gonna happen is that, you know, the more, especially with technology, everyone is talking, and it's like, yeah, dude, I didn't put up with that and I just walked. Well, that's what I'm gonna do tomorrow.
Well, here we are with the clash of these ideals, you know, from the two
Yeah.
generations. You know, the older generation thinks that the younger generation should be tougher skinned and just kind of deal with it the way that they did. Because I know I've had bad jobs. You know, you guys have probably had some crappy jobs. We just dealt with it. You know what I mean? And they're not willing to deal with that conflict. The older generation feels like they ought to just have thicker skin. But there has to be some give somewhere. We're going to have this problem, and we're not going to even come close to solving some of these issues without those two ideas softening a little bit, like not being so sensitive, but also being more sensitive. But both sides almost seem like they have to move a little bit. I don't know how to make that happen. on
yeah.
our-
Gotta find that dance, right?
It's got to balance, because if you're not willing to look at their point of view, they're not going to be willing to look at yours, right? So it's that give and take, and you got to find that balance. Even like Tim asked right here, he says, what is there to entice the younger generation? And then he follows that up with, you know, you look at what would make someone want to come to this trade from being a plumber or an electrician. Like, what are we offering that other people aren't? And I think at this point in time, there really isn't anything that the flooring industry is offering that you know, other people aren't. We're actually probably far behind what other people are
Yeah.
offering, because you're looking at, you know, electricians, and even around here we have, you know, electrical companies that have huge workforces. And it's like, you look at that and it's like people want to go work there. But then when you look at the flooring industry, it's always, I want to be my own boss. I want to have my own work. I don't want to work for someone. And the stigma just shouldn't be there, because there's companies out there that can put you in a better spot than, you know, going out there on your own and struggling for those couple years. Even if it's just a stepping stone. I know plenty of electricians that have gone through some of these companies and they do their own thing now. But it's going through them and getting that necessary education in order to get to that
That's what
level.
you said, education. So the electricians and the plumbers, and people who are the steel erectors, they're all subject to inspections, right? They have to have an inspection. Their workmanship, it has to be to a specific level and standard for the job to proceed to carry on. We don't get our stuff looked at unless it fails. They
Yeah, so
which puts them in a
government
category.
jobs, we had this discussion in our office last week or the week before about some of our government projects. you get each, sorry, I had a chat come up. You get each step of the way gets inspected. So we were doing ceramic tile and the prep got inspected prior to the waterproofing. And when the waterproofing was done, we had to call the Corps of Engineers guy in to inspect the waterproofing. And then it was the next step and the next step. That would be awesome if that happened. It would prevent a lot of failures, but it just isn't part of the trade. I think that your point to the electricians and the plumbers and things like that, from a trades perspective, they get better press than we do for sure. I mean, if you're scrolling through your feed and you see something about, joining the trade, it's usually electrician or plumber. Electricians are like, they're not my favorite people on job sites, but they certainly have the best press. You know what I mean? Our industry being so independent and installers wanting to become subcontractors and work on their own and do their own work. That's tough. If you work for a company, and we have hourly and subs, and many of our subs were hourly at some point. So I think that there's a progression that you could go through to becoming your own boss, but there's such a low barrier of entry to jump into flooring that guys do try to do it like 6 months after they've started with somebody and they don't have any previous experience. And so I think there's a dance there as well. But I think in my opinion, if the older generation will embrace the younger generation, and I know we're one of a million podcasts out there, so whoever's listening, embrace the younger generation and understand that you're providing for them a long life of earning if you can truly teach them how to do flooring. Eduardo, what the Q&A that jumped up is achieving dreams is possible through the flooring industry. Well, it is. I mean, you can make a lot of money, especially as a sub, but only if you're properly trained. I mean, a few failures and you're out of business if you're not doing it right,
Right. I mean,
So
just look at us. Just last week, we were in Georgia for the NFIC certification, right? And a lot of that carpet I've never even laid hands on until we got there. And I went there for the certification, right? But I went there with to learn about the product in case it ever comes up, not because that's what I'm going to go out looking for. I just want to know enough about something that if it pops up, even if I'm not the one doing it, I can know something about it and I know something is off right away.
yeah.
And it's that getting educated like that.
Well, what's the best way? I know that as we've talked before in previous huddles, the FCEF and TCA, all the organizations are kind of working on, and the WFCA, working on attracting new younger installers. It seems like that's working a bit, but from an overall standpoint, it'd be interesting to know their how many of those guys that they've ran through their 10-week course got a job and are staying. What's the staying power? What's the how long is that acquisition staying with the trade? Is the training working? Possibly, but are we resonating as an industry? Are we resonating with the younger crowd?
That's
That's a good question for them.
I
But
think
I'm
it's still
just
too early to know, right? Because this is just popping off in the last couple years, so that data has to start filtering through, and that, and it's not we don't need to know just that. We need to know, like, who are they being placed with? Are they being placed with someone that's going to pay them right?
treat them right. Obviously, treatment's a big part of this.
And just in our business, it's been an evolution, right? and I've said this before, it's when we started saying that, and when we stopped saying I can't afford this and started saying we can't afford not to do it, is when, you know, that progression started coming along. And it's, people need to start thinking like that. You know, I can't afford to pay my taxes. Well, at some point you're gonna get hit and you're gonna be like, man, I can't afford not to, right? Like
Yeah.
I shouldn't, that was a mistake. And you know, I can't afford to pay my employees, right? Well, the classification of workers right now that's going on everywhere, and it's, a lot of it is due to, you know, Uber and DoorDash and stuff, but it's, that's legit, man. It's gonna come back to bite us at some point, and it's, are you gonna, you know, start researching and getting on the right path now, or are you gonna wait until it's too late? A lot of the younger people want to see that income coming legit, because once they get that 1099 and they go to file their tax and they're like, wait, I owe money?
Yeah. What's this about? I thought I got refunds
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
It,
Besides the young generation who are trying to avoid paying some kind of outstanding debt that that they've acquired, I don't know too many that are real interested in worrying about their taxes at the turn of the year or every quarter. You know, they just the ones who are trying to avoid, you know, getting garnishments and stuff like that. And, you know, I know some of it is they just trying to put it on the back burner so they catch up. Some of it they're trying to avoid it, period. But not very many young people are coming up like, hey, is there a way for me to just pay my taxes in, you know, by every quarter, one lump sum? That's what I want to do. You know,
Yeah.
you kind of, no one jumps into it because they want to. They jump into it because they feel like that's a start, it's a beginning, or out of necessity.
Yeah, the tax thing is, we beat on it all the time because it's so doggone important. If you're gonna be an independent, pay in quarterly, talk to an accountant, pay in quarterly income taxes, estimates, and then you might get a refund at the end of the year. You might not, but at least you're not gonna have a huge tax bill at the end of the year.
right.
Managing the money from a business standpoint, the business piece of this, for subs is, it's one of the most important parts, because you can have a great installer that really gets himself, you know, in a pickle, that ends up, you know, there was a time there when sub was about it was it's still the majority of the work, but I mean, it seemed like you couldn't hire an hourly, if you wanted to, and then it turned, and it was a lot of guys who got behind on taxes and just needed to get the IRS off their back, so they get a W-2, and then they get garnished, and that's a better scenario than their house getting taken and everything else that could happen. So they get a job, they get a W-2, the government can garnish them, and that's a happier existence. We've had several guys come in because of that over the years, but just don't get yourself in that scenario. Pay your taxes on a
Right.
quarterly basis. I know it sucks, but at the end of the day, it's a much better existence than getting some huge tax bill at the end of the year.
And as
And
far
these
as
are things that the younger generation may not even like. I'm talking about just getting them into the trade. I would love for him to go to work for a company, for a preferred or a Stewart Associates, or someone who hires by the hour for several years before they go out and start their own gig. But
and this kind of ties back into, you know, one of the previous podcasts when we were talking about our body being our most important tool and how we have to take care of it, because for the longest time I didn't have health insurance, and that made me not go to the doctor at all. And it's like, just for, you know, simple stuff, take, you know, your shoulder, right? His shoulder is messed up, and we didn't have health insurance, so you're, of course I'm not gonna go to the doctor like, it'll probably be better next week. And a lot of
yeah,
these younger kids, you know, when they come into work somewhere and they have that accessible, and you tell them, yeah, go to the doctor, go to the dentist, you know, take care of your body. That's not what we were brought up. Like, it's beat yourself up as much as you can, and if you go see a doctor, well, you're a little beat. That's
yeah.
all it came down to. And it's like, no, that's where you get these younger people, and they look at things from a different perspective and doing things differently so that way they don't have to work as hard. Because honestly, I tell the guys, like, I'm 35, my hips and my knees are basically done.
Well,
Like,
there's
take
the
care of your body.
dichotomy of it too, right? Yeah, like we're short installers in our industry, so guys are working long hours and harder than. I mean, I've got guys that like have been ran pretty hard over the summer. You know, it's tough because you got the work that has to get done, you got the crews that can do it, but it requires a lot more time. We need to make flooring a living wage at 40 hours, I think is one of the answers. Like make it a living wage at 40 hours. And when I say living, I mean if we're gonna compete in the construction industry, a living wage isn't making it, you know, just getting by. It's being able to afford a lifestyle, and somehow that has to happen within 40 hours.
Right.
And
And a
that,
lot of that has to do with going back to the business side of things. People think that, oh, I'm just going to do this repair. It's going to take me 15 minutes. I'll just charge them 15 minutes worth of work. But it's more involved than that. It's your fuel. It's the, you know, the wear and tear on the vehicle. It's your body. It's your insurance. Like all this
Yeah.
gets wrapped up into that package of the 15 minutes, and what the repair that takes you 45 minutes to drive to 15 minutes to do, 45 minutes to drive back. And
Well,
that's not including loading up the tools that you need in the
Yeah.
morning, making sure you have everything. It's all this gets wrapped up into it. So, you know, you're looking all in at least 4 hours, and you have to hit a minimum day charge, because at that 4 hours, is it really 4 hours if you don't have anything to do after that because you scheduled this
yeah,
for?
it's just lost time at that point.
So, in order to have the younger people come in and be sustainable, you have to know how to run things like that. Because if you're going to hire someone to go do that, and it's like, yeah, it only took you 15 minutes, but younger people
Yeah,
are
you got
smart
several
enough to know
hours.
that I'm not going to go do this for 15 minutes,
Mhm.
right? You have to be able to make sure that they're covered for that day as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can do the best you can as a shop, but you know, our industry also has a vast amount of installers that work, you know, directly with builders and such. And, you know, good business practices is a whole nother podcast, and we've had a couple. We'll keep having them because to me it's you know, I think to all of us it's important that they understand the business side of this if you're going to be a sub. But bringing in and bridging the generational gap between installers, to me, really equates from this conversation. Experience is important to the younger generation. Take into account the way that you come across as an older person to that younger generation, because their feelings, like it or hate it, they, I think sensitive is the right word, Crystal. It's like a bit more sensitive, a bit more in touch with their feelings, and a bit more in touch with the fact that, like, if their experience sucks at work, they don't want to spend 8 hours doing it, or 10 hours for that matter. So the experience of working has to be somewhat, you know, pleasurable, or else we're not going to attract them. And flooring's a tough business. You know, it can be tough on your body, but there's also some really cool stuff. You know, staying in tune. And I know I preach about the conventions and the shows, but you get to go see some. I got to see tools I've never seen. I've been doing this my whole life, and I got to see tools I've never seen because they're constantly coming out with new stuff that will save your body. Jose and I've seen a few of them that
Yeah.
they will save your body. They will save you time. They will save the time on the floor. So that's getting involved. That requires some effort on the new installers' shoulders to, you know, take that step too, though.
It'd make their work look a lot better too, and put them on a whole nother platform as well, which brings more value to them long term. More
Yeah,
value.
even if you're by the hour, if you're versed on the Like if one of my guys came up to me and said, "Hey, I seen this awesome tool that I was watching this video online with Wolf and they showed this tool, can we get it?" That would be encouraging to me.
Yeah. I
You
think
know,
we
but
have awesome tools because of people coming in like that. Like, hey, you gotta check this out. Oh, let me check it out.
yeah,
Just the skinning tool that hit the market. First place I ever seen it was at a convention. As a matter of fact, I had it before it hit the market. And you know, we were doing our own custom transitions, nosings, reducers with Allie, and sitting there peeling by hand. And this guy says, "Look at this." Peel the whole plank, full print, everything in like 2 minutes. And I was like, "What?"
yeah. Well, I think it got mentioned on here before, and it may have been you, Daniel, talked about crab stretcher. That was like a carpet crab stretcher was mind-blowingly awesome to me when I first seen it. We just on two sides of a seam kicking it together and putting stay nails in, trying to, get bow and skew out and stuff.
Well, I know how mind blowing the crab stretcher was, and I don't know. I don't know if he'll remember, but what was the name of the job? The first job we did using a crab stretcher. The only reason we bought it, you don't remember? Bibles for Mexico. I'll remember. It was on the lakeshore, and we bought the crab stretcher for it because we had some very long seams, and I was not looking forward to knee banging that to get a little 1/2 inch pattern. So I'll never forget the job. I'll never forget where I was just like, I was happy we bought a new tool. Hey,
Yeah.
but now
Well,
look
there's the other thing is with the new tools. I know the tool manufacturers do a pretty good job of like getting their stuff out there, but I think a lot of that could reside with the younger generation as well, is the fact that not all this stuff is the way we used to do it. I mean, my kicker was 10 times better than the guy I learned from, who actually had an old kicker with a cotton butt on it, I mean, it was wrapped in leather and it was a cotton butt. And mine was a Cadillac compared to that. So I mean, the tools are getting better for us. Our bodies don't have to take the damage. If you're interested in the flooring trade, reach out to me, Paul at Go Carrera, Daniel, and Jose. Even Crystal, I bet, has a preferred flooring Michigan. What's your guys' email? It's Daniel at preferred.
PFMI. You can do pfmi.team. Remember, I said we shortened it up
Oh,
because
that's right.
he was like, that's preferred flooring. MI is too long. So
my pinkies don't work. On the keyboard.
So, I mean, reach out. We can get you connected to some awesome training. Truth is that the industry is getting better. It is a good industry. The one thing that I think we do have is a good community, people that want to solve some of the problems. We're just trying to figure everything out. It's kind of, I've said it before, I think we're the smallest big industry there is. It's like you have access to a lot of people in this industry that, you go to a convention, you can literally sit there and talk to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer. So, kind of getting involved is important, or at least
involved. You'd be
go
surprised.
get a job with a company that's involved. If you're just an installer and you're looking for an hourly gig or something, go with at least get with a company that's involved in this stuff. You be encouraged if you see your president or your install manager or something going to these conventions, because that's where we learn about the new tools, about the new processes, awesome new ways of doing things. I learned something at FCICA this last week that we're going to be implementing. We're going to integrate even further than we are now at the flooring company. So, there's always something to learn. I think if we all keep our learning hats on and, kind of address what the younger generation is looking for. I just got a chat that says entry level should come with health insurance. Well, at a company, at my flooring company, you have your health insurance paid for. So a lot of companies will, you have the access, but if you're going to be a sub, now you have to start looking at group policies and stuff like that. And I know the NTCA, and some of the other organizations have group rates for health insurance. So as a sub, if you want to look into that, reach out. We can get you connected, but there are group kind of health insurance for a sub if you want. But at the end of the day, if you want your health insurance provided, you're going to have to go to work by the hour for a company, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you know that if you are a company like, you know, we are, know that the benefits that you can offer do go a long way with the new hires that are coming in. And it's not just health insurance or the retirement. You have to look at packages like through the chamber, we get 20% off of one of the local colleges, and we get discounts at certain, you know, office supply stores and other things that can benefit the employees that are coming in. It's not just what you're offering. It's, I mean, it kind of is what you're offering, right? But it's the entire package deal. It's not just this is what we're offering because health insurance and stuff like that. It's expand on everything that from every organization that you're involved in, because all that can entice one person to come on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to get pretty comprehensive with it for sure. I don't know that we solved any problems. It's always a good discussion to try to understand and get a, you know, conversation going about this topic in particular, because I think that, well, it's clear from every report you get from the industry that we're aging out and not replacing fast enough. So this conversation has to continue. And, you know, leaders in this industry have to kind of open arms and lock hands with the others and try to help solve the problem. So
Yes,
I'll
sir.
continue to do it. I know you guys will, and I hope that we can make an impact here.
Right, and that whole from the CFI convention, the Women in Flooring roundtable that they did, when the younger ladies that were in there did speak out about how they felt about everything, is actually on our YouTube if you wanted to go over there and watch that entire thing. It's nice to see how there's, you know, the older generation, and then at the very end, the younger generation kind of spoke up and pretty much let us know exactly. She let us know how she felt, and it was
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that particular meeting really echoed a lot of what we've talked about. The experience, you know, having a work experience that's pleasant, you know, the fact that you know, the sexism in construction in general, and how they've made it through that. Some of the more experienced installers in that room spoke about that, and I'm sure it's still around, but I think that we're getting better as a society on those matters, and you know, hopefully, you know, anybody who wants to be in flooring is welcome, in my opinion, and we'd love to have all of you. So if you're interested in flooring, there are a lot of programs out there that you can get tied into. You can always shoot an email to support@gocarrera.com if you have questions about that, how to get involved, when conventions are, or when shows are. We can share any of that information with you. And we also have a page dedicated to training and where they're at and everything like that on our website at gocarrera.com. You can reach out to Daniel, Jose, and them over at Preferred Flooring. I guarantee you they can get you hooked into some awesome trainings if you're looking to get involved in this industry. So, and so with that, guys, we've reached our time limit, and I want to tell you I appreciate the input. I know it's like, you know, a lot of these you want to get to some resolution. We can't get to resolution on this matter. We can just have discussions and hope that people hear, people
Yeah, this is
make
something
some
that the
changes.
conversation is going to have to keep on going on, because it's going to be constantly evolving anyways, because as soon as we get this generation that we're dealing with right now, as soon as we're like, all right, we understand them, that's when the next one's coming in.
Yeah. So you got to be pliable.
Yes, sir.
Got to.
All right,
And
guys. Well,
don't forget
thank you so
about-
much, Crystal. What's that?
Don't forget about the scholarship.
Yes, just to mention that again, thank you, Daniel, is the SIM scholarship with the FCICA. Again, email support at Go Carrera or Ashlyn at Go Carrera, and enter to win that scholarship. Again, it's an awesome
Absolutely.
training, and I
Good
think
one.
you'll hear a lot of the stuff that we've talked about echoed in that training, but with deeper knowledge and deeper training into it. So anybody who
this
wants
is-
to do that.
When we figure out which one we're gonna kind of push for this, maybe we got to make it so me and you are there, so that way they're not there by themselves.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, Stockton's the next one. I just don't know if they are going to be able to have room at that one. So I believe we're going to have to go with the one after that. And I don't know that that's been set yet. So that's why we're not quite sure of which one I believe it's the next one after Stockton, but I just don't have the dates and the time
Right.
and the location. But yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go to that one,
And
and
space to
whoever
host.
wins can hang out with Daniel and I, and
Maybe Crystal will be there if we can't be there. We
Yeah.
gotta set it up so that way someone will be there, right?
that'd be awesome.
She said she's entering to try and win it.
It's excluded.
Yeah. I
There you
think
go. Hey, she can do
Yeah.
He
it.
didn't say my name though, he said your name.
That's true.
All right.
All right,
Paul,
guys.
appreciate
Thanks a
it.
lot. I appreciate you. And we will be seeing you guys next week. And have a pleasant week, everyone.
Thanks, you too.
See ya.
Thanks. Bye.